Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation today taking dramatic steps to quell the growing phone hacking scandal. He's shutting down News of the World. It's a 168-year-old tabloid at the center of the controversy. News Corp Deputy Chief Operating Officer James Murdoch, Murdoch's son, issuing a statement saying News of the World is in the business of holding others to account, but it failed when it came to itself. So how will the death of the paper affect News Corp's reputation and its bottom line? We're joined now by Doug Creutz, who follows News Corp. He follows the stock for Cowen Co. Joining us now from San Francisco. Also with us, Felix Gillette, who covers media for Bloomberg Businessweek. The new issue, of course, on newsstands now. Felix Gillette, let's start with you.
Yes.
Is this a big deal? I mean, shutting down the newspaper, is this unprecedented?
Stunning development. I mean, really surprising. Previously, the whole crisis management strategy from News Corporation for the past 5 years, as this has been developing, has been to say, this is not really that big of a deal. It was the action of one rogue reporter. He went to jail. We've handled this. This is old news. Anytime there'd be a big story coming out about more phone hacking scandal, they would say, oh, this is the Guardian. They're our business competitors. They don't like us. It's the New York Times. They don't like us. And really trying to contain this and dismiss it. And just in the past week, it has just blown up into something that they can no longer easily dismiss. They can no longer brush aside. And I think today, it was a huge surprise development that instead of saying that really there is no culture of phone hacking, they actually went out and raised the entire culture.
Doug Creutz, come in on this topic of what effect the closing of News of the World would have on News Corp. This is not a big moneymaker for the company, is it?
No, we estimate that News of the World probably accounts for at most 1% of their total operating income. Financially, it's not a terribly big deal for News Corp. I think, the bigger issue is that Rupert Murdoch is at heart a newspaper man, and for him to shutter one of his major newspapers, I think could not have been an easy decision for him to make, nor one that he probably would have liked to have done. But it's true. I mean, this is just kind of blown out of proportion. They've been trying to manage this crisis carefully for several years. But instead of potentially coming out early on and doing a full and complete airing of the facts, they've chosen to minimize it. And the risk of that is if the facts catch up with you, it can wind up becoming much worse than it would be if you had dealt with it completely at the beginning of the scandal.
Doug Creutz, will the facts, or are there facts that you believe will catch up with senior executives of News Corp?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. I don't want to speculate too much there, but it is, I will say, interesting that they have chosen to shutter the newspaper as opposed to letting go any executives who, one could argue should have been more out in front of this than they were, and that's clearly a decision that's come from the top of News Corp. I think that it remains to be seen whether this will get them back out in front of the issues and will quell the controversy, or whether this takes on a life of its own.
Felix Gillette, the idea of hacking into people's phone mail messages, this is not exclusive to News of the World or Murdoch newspapers, correct?
Correct. I think a lot of people, reporters in London were doing this, at tabloids beyond News Corp tabloids. So I think part of the strategy here is for News Corp to basically say, we were wrong. There was a major problem. And I think now that they've sort of shuttered one of their papers, they can also go ahead and say, this wasn't just a problem at our culture. This is really a journalism problem. It's a systemic problem throughout the papers in London. We want to get out ahead of this, and we want to be part of the solution in terms of making sure that people don't keep doing this.
Doug Creutz, does this change anything having to do with News Corp's desire to acquire the rest of British Sky Broadcasting, that they don't already own? This has got to be approved by the British government, right?
Yeah, and this has everything to do with the decision today. There has been significant public opposition to News Corp's taking over Sky B on the grounds that it reduces media plurality, but that seemed to have all been settled. As this cell phone hacking scandal has blown up again, though, it's increased pressure on the government to relook at this proposed merger. And I think that, essentially News Corp is trying to make a sacrifice here of a small asset in order to protect what it views as a potentially bigger and more valuable asset.
All right, I want to thank you, gentlemen, very much. Doug Creutz joining us from Cowen & Company in San Francisco, and our own Felix Gillette from Bloomberg Businessweek.